The sound of gravel under the tires was the last thing I heard of my son's presence. No goodbyes, no promises to call, just the mechanical hum of his BMW pulling away from the circular drive, leaving me standing on the porch of a house I hadn't seen in 15 years. I adjusted the collar of my dress, the same one I'd worn to Bradley's funeral 3 months ago, and watched the red taillights disappear between the oaks. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was absolute, suffocating in the way only true isolation can be. "You'll be happier here, Mom," Bobby had said in that patronizing tone he'd perfected since becoming a successful developer. "The city's too much for you now. All that noise. All those memories. 43 years of marriage, like something to be tossed out with the old furniture." I turned back toward the house, our house, Bradley's and mine, though now it felt more like a mausoleum. The porch sagged slightly on the eastern side, a few shutters hung at odd angles. The white paint had faded to the color of old bones. The key stuck in the lock, protesting with a metallic squeal that echoed across the empty fields. Inside, dust motes danced in the late afternoon light streaming through dirty windows. The air smelled of abandonment, and something else. Something sweet and rotting that made my stomach twist. The wheels of my suitcase clicked rhythmically across the wooden floor as I walked toward what used to be our bedroom. Everything was exactly as we'd left it during our last visit. The quilt Bradley's mother had made was still folded at the foot of the bed, my reading glasses on the nightstand, his work boots by the closet door. I sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, feeling the springs creak beneath me. The silence pressed against my eardrums like deep water. Bobby had been thorough in his exile. "No internet, you never really used it anyway, Mom. No landline, who even has those anymore?" My cell showed a single bar of reception, blinking like a dying heartbeat. He had even taken the keys to my car, claiming the Honda needed major repairs that weren't worth the cost. "I'll handle everything from the city," he'd assured me. "Luke and I will check in on you every few weeks. You just focus on resting." Rest. The word was bitter in my mouth. At 62, I was apparently supposed to fade quietly, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. As I hung my clothes in the master closet, my fingers brushed against Bradley's old jackets. They still faintly smelled of his cologne and the cherry pipe tobacco he liked on Sunday evenings. I buried my face in the wool of his winter coat. That's when I felt it. Something solid pressed against the back wall of the closet, hidden behind a row of moth-eaten items I didn't recognize. I pushed the clothes aside and saw a stack of boxes I had never seen before. They were labeled in Bradley's neat handwriting. Personal research, dated from the last 3 years of his life. My heart pounded as I lifted the top box. It was heavier than I expected, stuffed with manila folders and scientific journals. But it was the small leather notebook wedged between 2 larger ledgers that made my hands tremble. Property Survey and Agricultural Assessment was embossed in gold letters on the cover. Inside, Bradley's familiar handwriting filled every page. The specimen continues to demonstrate exceptional regenerative properties. Root system extends deeper than initially calculated. May need to expand cultivation area by spring. I flipped through pages of detailed sketches, pH readings, soil compositions, and what looked like chemical formulas. Bradley was a structural engineer, not a botanist. What was all this? Dr. Roberts confirms preliminary findings. Compound extraction successful. Commercial applications are vast. Pharmaceutical-grade extracts testing at 94% purity. My chest tightened. Commercial applications. Market research. Bradley had never mentioned any of this. If anything happens to me, Alexis must know. Instructions in the envelope. She's stronger than our son realizes. I set the diary down with trembling fingers. Bradley had known. Somehow, he'd known Bobby would try to sideline me. The envelope, where was it? I searched through the boxes with a new urgency. Finally, tucked inside the back cover of the diary, I found it, a sealed manila envelope marked, "For when they forget your worth." Inside were detailed instructions in Bradley's handwriting, 3 business cards, and, my breath caught, a small stack of $100 bills. I counted them twice. $5,000 in cash. Alexis, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and they've underestimated you. You've always been the pragmatist in our partnership. The plant species documented in this journal grows wild on the eastern 40 acres of our property. Dr. Tiffany Roberts, a botanist, worked with me to verify its medicinal properties. Kayla Chen, an agricultural consultant, knows the cultivation requirements. The southeastern shed contains all necessary equipment. You have everything you need to build something lasting. They wanted to send you out to pasture, my dear. Show them how the garden grows instead. The revelation. The next morning I stood at the kitchen window, clutching Bradley's journal like a talisman. My cell signal stabilized, and I dialed the first number in the envelope. Dr. Roberts speaking. This is Alexis Westfield. I believe you knew my husband, Bradley. A pause, then a softer tone. Mrs. Westfield, I'm so sorry for your loss. Bradley was extraordinary. I always wondered what became of his project. 3 hours later, a dusty Honda Civic pulled into my driveway. Dr. Tiffany Roberts was younger than I expected, around 45, with black hair and a practical ponytail and dirt under her nails. Bradley never told you about any of this? She asked, shaking her head as we walked toward the eastern fields. The path through the tall grass was barely visible. But Tiffany moved with purpose, leading me to a part of the property I hadn't explored in years. Here, she said, pointing to what looked like ordinary weeds. Your husband discovered something remarkable here. She gently lifted the plant by its roots. The stalk looked unremarkable, but the root system was massive, almost architectural in its complexity. Salvia medicinalis. It's not in any textbooks, we only classified it 8 months ago. Related to common sage, but with unprecedented healing properties. She pulled a small vial of clear liquid from her bag. This extract accelerates wound healing by 40%. Reduces inflammation better than most prescription drugs. The pharmaceutical industry would pay millions for a reliable supply. The shed. At the southeastern shed, Tiffany pulled out a set of keys. Bradley asked me to keep these, she said, unlocking the heavy wooden doors. Inside was a fully equipped botanical processing setup, stainless steel extractors, industrial drying racks, bottling machinery, and a small lab worth tens of thousands. Bradley built all of this himself over the last year and a half, Tiffany said. He told me he wanted you to have options. The first harvest. 3 weeks later, I stood in the shed at 6 a.m., watching Kayla Chen examine soil samples under a portable microscope. A compact woman in her 50s with calloused hands. Your husband was right about the microclimate, she said. The pH balance is perfect for medicinal sage. We can triple your viable growing zone. That same day, Patricia Williams, an attorney, arrived in a silver Mercedes. She was younger than I expected, about 40, with short blonde hair. Bradley talked about you often, she said. Said you had the sharpest business mind he ever worked with. If we do this right, you're looking at 7-figure annual revenue within 18 months. She laid out documents across my kitchen table. I've drafted everything to register Westfield Botanical Solutions. Christmas revelation. By Christmas Eve, I stood in Bobby and Luke's marble foyer, watching their faces register my transformation. I arrived in a brand new Ford F-150, bought with my first major income check. Mom, you look, Bobby hesitated. You look amazing. At dinner, they peppered me with questions designed to confirm their assumptions about my deteriorating state. How are you handling the isolation? Luke asked. Must be hard being all alone out there. I'm rarely alone these days. Bobby's head snapped up. What do you mean? I've been working with some wonderful people. Working? Bobby's fork paused midair. What kind of work? Agricultural consulting. Small-scale farming. They exchanged glances across the table, clearly alarmed. Sounds quaint, Luke said carefully. As a hobby. After dinner, Bobby pulled out a manila folder, estate planning documents, power of attorney forms. I've been thinking about your situation, he began. I really believe it would be best if I managed some of your affairs. Why would that be best? Because you're vulnerable out there. I opened my handbag and pulled out my own folder. Since we're discussing family business, there are a few things I should probably mention. I spread out documents, FDA approvals, commercial distribution contracts, bank statements showing deposits that dwarfed Bobby's real estate commissions, and Westfield Botanical Solutions registration papers. The silence lasted nearly a minute. What is all this? Bobby whispered. My farming hobby. It's gone better than expected. Bobby lifted a bank statement, his face pale. It says you deposited $60,000 just last month. That was a light month. December was much stronger. Luke leaned over to inspect the contracts. Alexis, these are millions in orders. How is this possible? Bobby asked, his hands shaking. You don't know anything about business. Actually, I know quite a lot. I just haven't had many chances to show it lately. Luke stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You built a pharmaceutical company in 6 months. Bradley left a solid foundation. I just built on it. Bobby stood suddenly, pacing. This doesn't make sense. Dad never mentioned any pharmaceutical research. Your father was many things you never bothered to learn about, I said sharply. Even if those contracts are real, you can't manage all this alone. I have professional support. Tiffany Roberts is my research partner. Patricia handles legal. Kayla oversees cultivation. Mary Stone manages day-to-day operations. You hired staff. 12 so far. We'll likely expand to 25 by spring. This is what I was afraid of, Bobby said. You're being taken advantage of. I haven't touched Bradley's life insurance money. Then where did the startup capital come from? I smiled. Your father planned more thoroughly than any of us knew. There were resources you weren't aware of. The implication hit him like cold water. Bradley had prepared for the possibility that his son would underestimate his widow. You're saying he hid assets from me? I'm saying he knew the difference between protection and control. Luke examined a venture capital proposal. Alexis, this says they want to invest $15 million in expansion. That's right. Bobby sank into the couch. None of this makes sense. 6 months ago, you could barely function. 6 months ago, I let you make my decisions because I thought family loyalty required it. Since then, I've learned the difference between family loyalty and family control. As I began gathering my documents, Luke asked, Where are you going? Back to the property. Production starts tomorrow. You can't just leave, Bobby said, standing. We need to discuss this. I paused at the foyer closet to grab my coat. Bobby, I appreciate your concern. But I don't need to be protected from success. This isn't success. It's an illusion. People like you don't build pharmaceutical companies. People like me. The phrase crystallized everything I had felt during Bobby's campaign to manage me. You're right, I said, slipping on my coat. People like me usually don't build pharmaceutical companies. We usually let our children convince us we're too fragile to try. I headed to the door, then turned back. I won't be coming for the holidays next year. Westfield Botanical Solutions is expanding into 3 more states, and I'll be traveling often to oversee new developments. The cold air outside was crisp against my cheeks as I walked to my truck. I drove the empty city streets to the highway that would take me home, to my fields, my team, my growing empire. Bobby wanted me dependent and grateful for his oversight. Instead, I became independent, and powerful beyond his comprehension. Bradley's voice whispered from memory. They wanted to send you out to pasture, my dear. Show them how the garden grows instead. I smiled and pressed the gas, eager to return to the life I built from exile, the empire I raised from weeds, the future I reclaimed from the ashes of their expectations.